Hello, everyone, and welcome along to the VCO Studio show hosted by me, Ben Constanduros. Here at VCO, we are passionate about merging the worlds of real and esports racing, something personally I'm all very passionate about as well. And so tonight we meet an esports racing megastar who has experience in both the virtual and the real worlds and is one of the best in the virtual world. You may know him as Sebastian Job. You may know him as Sebi, but in fact, it's Seb Job this evening.
Hi.
Good evening. That's not a bad. Welcome, is it?
Yeah, no, pretty good. I think it was Megastar. I heard. I'll take that.
And getting your name right. Difficult world in commentating in the sim, as I well know, because you don't get a chance generally to speak to the drivers. But it must be a little frustrating that most people call you Sebastian Job.
I got a few bit of joking around the name at school. Eventually got used to everyone saying it wrong, so it's I'm fine with it. People say it wrong all the time. Get used to it.
So you're kind of rocking the Sebastian Vettel, the Robert Kubica, who are just kind of saying, "Hey, you're never going to get it right." So
I actually didn't know they were pronounced wrong. I didn't know the correct pronunciations for those names, but yeah, pretty much. I'm not too fast.
Right, so we're going to do a bit of a "This Is Your Life" and kind of rewind back to your very early days. Memories of motorsport. Kind of, what's your first memory of motorsport?
Ooh, I think it would be. That's a tough one. Because my timeline of when I was younger is terrible. My memory is not great, but I'd say we go back to maybe 7 or 8, maybe when I went go-karting for the first time.
Okay.
And then my dad was not a massive F1 fan, but he watched it, most weekends, and I'd watch it as well. I remember getting pretty upset at some of the results when I was younger. So
because you were a fan of?
At the time, I was a fan of Hamilton. Now I'm not necessarily not a fan of Hamilton. I'm just not a fan of I don't have a favorite now. But I just liked him because he was the British guy. Have to cheer for the British guy. And then I think 12, I started go-karting, just indoor karting, and then 13, I finally signed up for iRacing and started my sim racing career as it is. So now I've been doing that for 7 years.
Yeah, so karting for you was just a little bit of kind of indoor, going to a track and a bit of rental cars, was it?
Yeah, as I'm sure you know, karting is incredibly expensive, so it was just a indoor kart academy, one or 2 rounds a month. It was like a championship, but it was not outdoor karting. Rental karts, I think they had a top speed of 30-40 miles an hour, not fast things, but it taught me the basics, car control, keeping momentum up, weight transfer, all that stuff, and taught me the basics. And then just because I had no alternative, I couldn't go into outdoor karting where it got faster and more competitive. I had to switch to sim racing, which was also more affordable.
How did you know about sim racing and iRacing specifically when you first started? How did you find out about it?
I think it was just YouTube videos. There was a few. I think it was the iRacing. I think they were they had a tutorial series when you're starting in iRacing, and I was actually 12 at the time, so I couldn't even sign up. But I was watching all these guys for when I could finally sign up. And then I started watching people like Jimmy Broadbent on YouTube or Empty Box. I've watched a few of those videos, and I was really excited. And on my 13th birthday, I just signed up straight away. But I don't know how I came across it. I must have just seen it in a recommended video on YouTube or something.
And quickly got yourself a steering wheel of pedals. Presumably that had to be a Christmas or birthday present back in those days.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, actually, because I don't know when I got the wheel, but I had one a few years before that was terrible that I tried using on the Wii or something. But I don't count this as a part of the whole sim racing stuff. But yeah, it must have been back then. It was I think a Logitech G27, my first wheel. No, driving Porsche GT. G27 was far too expensive. So yeah, that would have been the first wheel for me. And then eventually upgraded to a G27 like a year or two later, I guess.
I've just realised you said at the start that your memories of when you were younger were quite difficult. So this interview is going to go really well talking about your past.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any early memories of racing on iRacing? Specific things that happened to you that were quite funny, or just the struggle of getting through those early races?
When I first started iRacing, I was terrible. Like the raw pace was quite good, but I was stuck in rookies for far longer than anyone should be. Like you look at a guy that drives a Red Bull and you think, oh, he probably got out of rookies quite quickly, and all that. I was stuck in rookies for months. Couldn't get my license cars. Yeah, you part of that club too.
I'm still part of that
club. Yeah, luckily I got out of it eventually. But yeah, that was the main thing. I had a lot of connection problems when I first started, and then it was more about getting consistent. Not like a lot of the time, it wasn't so much crashing other people. That was never the problem. I just kept spinning by myself. And then when I got into like top level races, that didn't go away. Eventually it did. It was like a theme for a few years, even like starting from when I was in rookies, but eventually went away. But yeah, there was a lot of good times, like battles in the Skip Barber. I raced that car a huge amount. And was lucky to win a couple of championships in that. But
so was that your first favorite car? Because everyone's got a favorite car and track combination on iRacing, and was that the one that you kind of obsessed over?
Yeah, back in the day, the Skip Barber was like, it was my baby. I drove that car so much. I think there was one season that I'm really proud of where I did 3 Skip Barber championships and I won all 3 on the same season. That was still one of my, and I think it was 2014, so I was still quite young, and I was really proud of that at the time. Obviously, the level isn't that amazing compared to the championship that I'm doing now, but it was still quite a cool achievement at the time for me.
And you know what? The level is only ever as good as you are. That's the beauty of iRacing. You're always racing at a level that's relevant to you at the time.
Yeah, to me at the time, like I thought this is so much, like the level here is so good. This is really difficult. And so when I won those things, I was like, damn, I must be pretty good. And then eventually, you get a reality check when you move up, but then you learn from them, you get better. And so there's always someone to learn from, which is the best thing. There's there's never an easy competition, really.
Did you ever have a moment where you thought, right, I'm going to take this super seriously now? Or was it just a natural experience that you just loved iRacing so much that you just found yourself in these championships with these teams?
I kind of wondered that myself a few times, like if I could really pinpoint that point where I was like, yeah, I want to take this seriously. And I think it was just like a naturally evolving thing. Like I started getting more and more like, oh damn, I'm actually kind of good at something. And it took me a few months to like kind of get it in my head, like you might actually have a chance to get into the world championship. Because at first I was like, nah, there must be something wrong. Like there's gotta be, I don't know, like something wrong with my computer, or it's giving me like extra grip or something. But no, eventually I kind of realized that, yeah, you can start to do well in this. And I joined a team called Apex Racing at the time. And I think that was when it started to get serious with the push for pro. And that would have been 2014, I think, sometime in 2014. I don't know, early or late, but around then.
So you obviously, iRacing was what dragged you in the first place, that you felt comfortable with. Was there any kind of early experimentation with other platforms? I mean, when we talk to the older drivers like Katzberg or myself, we talk about Grand Prix 1, Grand Prix 2, these titles that you probably have never seen operate, but were part of our growing up. Was it just iRacing for you?
I played like the odd game when I was younger, like I think it was Taco Race Driver 3 or 4, one of those.
Yeah. 3 or 4.
I loved that game, whichever one it was. But that was like when I was, a few years younger still, like when I wasn't taking it seriously. As soon as I got into iRacing for like a good few years, I don't really think I touched any other games. I maybe tried F1 once, like when F1 Esports started, but I think that's like 2017. I really didn't touch any other games for a good few years, or other racing games, I should say. So yeah, it was like a hardcore grind for a few years, basically.
And you spoke about the Skip Barber. Was that therefore always single seaters that you were driving, or did you dabble with, I said it last week to Bruno Spengler, a bit of off-road, bit of dirt, bit of ovals, just a bit of fun, or was it always super serious single seaters? We do this.
No, yeah, I drove a lot of overs. I think I was never really that good at it. I remember, actually, that's one memory I have of when I was first new to iRacing is someone shared a really good setup for the street stock at Charlotte, and that's a completely flat out track. And I just remember winning every single race on this flat out track for like a week, and my iRating just went up and up. But like I did ovals just for a bit of fun. I did other cars for a bit of fun, but nothing like I never really tried anything else seriously. And for the first few years, it was always just single seaters, like Skip Barber. Then it was, I think, like Star Mazda or something. I remember trying the IndyCar a little bit, but I wasn't great in that. And then there was F1 as well. I think F1 actually came first for some reason. But yeah, it was only last few years I got into GT cars. It was mostly single seaters when I first started. I guess because it's the F1 is the pinnacle, so you kind of trying to emulate that at some point. Yeah. But eventually you get bored of that, I guess. And so the last few years, I'm not being bothered to what I drive really.
If you want to ask Sebastian Job a question, please use the chat below us on YouTube here. You can also tweet, and we will put those questions to him. Can be anything. Secrets of how to be fast, all those kind of things. Do get them down, and we'll carry on our little chat. So single seaters were always the thing in the virtual world, and you had the opportunity to do a season in the real world, in a Formula 4 car. There must have been some transferable skills from your Skip Barber days into the Formula 4.
Yeah, a little bit. So I was lucky to get a season racing Formula Ford in the British Championship. And so I used a lot of the skills I learned from iRacing, but there was one thing that I didn't really account for, and I was just not aggressive enough. And I don't mean that like racing other cars. That was one thing, but it was, I remember my first test date, I was so many seconds off because I didn't get any heat into the tires. And iRacing has this driving style where you have to nurse the car a bit more. You're not as aggressive as real life. And this took me a while to like kind of understand. So the general idea, like driving lines, weight transfer, all that stuff, that all applied. But then you had to like turn it up a notch and get way more aggressive. You had to really get the heat into the tires. Otherwise, it was just it was just the car. You couldn't feel the car as much. The more you pushed, the more you could feel the car underneath you. And I didn't have that at first, and it took a while to get used to it. But the general basic driving style was 100% there from iRacing.
And you bring up a very good point because, as you've mentioned, iRacing has this tyre model, or had this tyre model, that was kind of like driving on ice for the first couple of laps, regardless of whether you were in a single-seater with slicks or road tyres or a GT car. But they have been addressing that over the last couple of years. And for me anyway, it feels like it's getting better. Has that been to the detriment of your kind of careful driving style?
I'm quite lucky that I've just, subconsciously, I've just adapted to it. I've not made conscious efforts to do this about my driving, do this about my driving. But it's getting better in some ways, and then there's other ways that it's got a little bit worse. But it is normally, if something's bad, they will fix it. And so it's slowly getting there. I think there's a lot of things that I would change, but in general, I still think there's a good basis there. But I can't say like whenever the build changes, I can't say I like suddenly think, oh, I have to be way more aggressive or I have to be way more careful. It's a gradual progression. Day by day, you just start learning things and get faster and faster.
So going back to kind of other experiences, did you feel like that Formula Ford experience was there to try to lead you into more real world racing, or were you still happy at that point with your sim racing?
Yeah, that's was and still is the ultimate goal, basically, to get into real racing as a full-time job. That's the dream for me. That was a awesome year because I got to kind of test the waters with it. You know, I got to have a full year, see what it's like, and it kind of lived up to everything I wanted to be and more. But then, you know, you're hit when you can't continue it, and it's a bit of a downer. But it's certainly something that I want to try and continue with more competitions like that. Obviously, Race of Champions that I had in. Oh, you have to help me. I think it was late 2018, early 2019. Yeah, early January 2019. Got to that, and that was great as well. Just trying to get into real cars as much as I can, really. That's the main goal with all of it, I think.
Yeah, one of only 8 sim races or 9 sim races to ever experience a real Race of Champions. And just talk a little bit about that experience, because it's not just about driving cars and the competition. There's so much more that you end up doing alongside legends of the sport.
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty surreal experience. You know, we flew to Mexico. That was the first quite ridiculous thing.
First time you've ever been out of Europe?
Might be, actually. Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah.
So it was a really long flight. Had all these cameras on you a lot of the time. You'd speak into all these, you know, motorsport legends, just chatting with them like about normal stuff, which is pretty cool. And you know, staying at this really nice hotel. We were treated so well for the whole weekend, and driving all these amazing cars. It was just a crazy experience that I don't think you could get normally, but because of sim racing, it just allows you to be able to speak with all these people, to go to these events. It's quite something. And then it was a similar thing with World's Fastest Gamer that I had recently, where we went to the US, and it was a similar kind of thing, you know, driving these awesome cars, meeting racing legends. And that's all because of sim racing, and it's definitely something that I will always be able to remember and look back fondly on.
Yeah, talk a little bit more about the World's Fastest Gamer competition, because for a lot of people, they may have followed a little bit on social media and seen nuggets of what you were up to, but many will have not seen the documentary that gets made around the process. You do get to do some pretty cool things. There was a competition set up on a roof.
Yeah. So there's a lot for me to talk about that trip, and I wouldn't be able to fit it into this small interview.
What do you mean it's not small? So this is your life, Seb?
Yeah. But it's the competition on the roof was pretty awesome. We had the first one in, where did we have that? In LA, where we were on a rooftop doing an R Factor race, and then later on we were at San Francisco with this insane backdrop of the whole city, doing another R Factor race. And then in between, you know, we're driving these race cars around all these famous racetracks, Willow Springs, Laguna Seca, just for 2 weeks straight. And it was pretty awesome. There's a lot of traveling, but yeah, it was a crazy 2 weeks. Something that like I couldn't think of even like a few months before that. It was let alone a few years ago, to imagine that I'd be able to do something like that and drive these race cars. And the stuff you learn on those trips, you know, speaking to people like Montoya, the advice he gets. You know, we got to go out on he gave us like a taxi ride of a track, and he was just showing us all these techniques, you know, teaching us, and it was just very eye-opening.
Now, we haven't spoken about that logo on your right shoulder, because you were part of the G2 Esports team, and when they became the Red Bull Esports team, that must have been a massive moment to be a Formula One fan and to suddenly be representing a brand like Red Bull.
Yeah, it's quite surreal. It's kind of sunk in eventually, so now it's almost normal. But at the time, it was quite something. you know, when I'm speaking with my friends and they introduce me to someone, there's always the, oh, he's a Red Bull driver or something. It's always nice to be able to represent such a massive brand, especially doing something that you love. It's pretty much the perfect scenario, really. So yeah, I think we joined about a year and a half ago. There was this core group of us in G2, and Danny, the team manager, had I'm not sure how it came about, but basically Danny became the Red Bull Racing Esports manager. Brought all of us along as well, and G2 and Red Bull working together on this. And now we're basically just Red Bull instead of G2, but G2 deal with a lot of stuff as well. So we're kind of dealing with both companies, but yeah, it's perfect scenario, really. It's can't be much better for me.
That's two massive companies from the world of either sim racing or real world racing. What do Red Bull bring to the party? You know, for you, how do you feel they benefit you?
So I get a lot of support on and off the track. You know, I've got so recently I got my new wheel, and because it's a very strong wheel, I was starting to get shoulder pains, and so we got a personal trainer sorted to guide me through some exercises that can relieve me of the pain. I've been able to sorry, my mind went blank for a second, but yeah, we also had a session with a psychologist to go through some certain stuff about trying to improve performance. There's all sorts of stuff as well, and being able to go to the Red Bull factory, have an onboarding, as it was called, you know, going through everything about Red Bull, the history of it. Very cool. And lots of support on the track as well. You know, we've got lots of guys working on stuff, lots of social media support as well, which is always really good if you're trying to get yourself out there, especially if you're like me and you want to have a chance at getting into real world racing. So it's a lot of support that people don't always see as well, that goes on in the background.
So let's talk a little bit as I see some questions coming in. So hang fire, people. We will get those questions asked to Sebi in a few moments' time. Let's talk about your main focus over the last 2 years, I suppose. You were known for being an incredibly fast guy over one single lap. And in terms of iRacing, you were the hot lapping king. But when it came to racing over a long period, perhaps had mistakes coming in, those seem to have been eradicated over the last 2 years in the Supercup.
Yeah, there was still I still had a couple of mistakes in me last year, and that if you remove those mistakes, obviously everyone else has mistakes as well. I wasn't the fastest on track last year, but if you remove those mistakes, then I would have probably won the championship. But then you could say that for everyone else. But those were just my mistakes, not, you know, getting involved in a crash with another person, which was normally the case for the others at the front. So there was still a few mistakes in it, but I think I've kind of got rid of that now. It's gone well mostly this year. I kind of, as I said earlier, it was a thing for a few years, and I've kind of slowly grown out of it, almost bullied into getting better, because it was always mentioned, you know, oh, he's making lots of mistakes even if he has the pace. But now I've kind of managed to fix that, and getting close to being a more complete driver. Obviously, is not even close to being where I would like to be, because you can always improve. But yeah, it's getting there. There's always still some work to improve, but I'm pretty happy with the progress it's made. And I think also part of that is equipment. I changed my equipment a lot from last year, when I basically reinvested all of the money I made from Porsche last year and put it all into my equipment. And I have said it's made a massive difference, like way more consistency, way less crashing. And yeah, it makes the difference for sure.
You see, exec producer, we needed to have done a show us your rig. Seb, you're going to have to share us a little bit with the secrets. What have you changed? What has brought that consistency?
So last year I had a really bad rig when you consider I'm competing for so much money. I should be able to use something better, and it was something I was really disappointed that I couldn't use a better rig. Or I say rig, I didn't have a rig. I was driving at a desk on a dining chair with Fanatec CSL Elite wheel and pedals. This year I invested a lot of money into it just to make sure I have no excuses, we'll say. Got the best stuff now. So I've got a SimLab P1 rig with 3 screens around me. I have a Husinkveld Ultimate pedals, which is their best pedals that you can get, and I have to say I love them to bits. And then I got a Simucube 2 Ultimate wheel, and then an Asher F28 rim, and then a Sparko seat that I'm saying. And also a PC upgrade, although I might have done that halfway through last season. But yeah, it's the main thing for me was having that seat in the same position every time. You know, when you sit down in a dining chair, you have to like wriggle about, get the seat in the perfect position. Whereas now it's every time it's the exact same. You know, your wheels in the same position. Everything's very tightly fitted, and you don't need to. There's no like distractions in the back of your mind about that stuff.
You must have had to change your driving style though, because presumably with your old rig, you were needing to be very soft on the pedals. If you were too hard, your dining chair would fall backwards and perhaps break your legs. But now you're in a high performance GT car spec pedals where you have to exert pressure, big pressure.
Yeah, it took a bit of getting used to, but at the same time, when I've gone to these LAN events,
sure.
you have to adjust really quick. And I think if I was to like list one of my skills, I think that's one of the things that I'm better at, getting used to a rig really quickly. And luckily, to be honest, when I got my new pedals, I remember it took me like 10 laps to get used to it. And then after that, I wasn't even matching my times from before. I was already beating them because they're just you're not having to like kind of think about what you're doing. You're just doing it subconsciously. You're just like, I slam the brake with not everything I've got, but you know, like a pretty solid amount, and I know it's going to be right on the limit of locking up. Whereas with old pedals, you know, if I put a tiny bit too much pressure, it's going to have a much bigger distance that it's going to travel just from that bit of pressure. So there's a lot less margin for error, basically. With the steering wheel, probably a bit of driving style change, just for the physicality of it. Like I run my force feedback very high. And so for, like I said about the shoulder stuff, it took me a couple of weeks to get used to that, to be able to do sessions without having a bit of shoulder pain. And then as soon as you have a bit of pain, it's in the back of your mind. You start thinking about other stuff. So that was important to get used to really quickly. But it's not like, the thing is with good equipment, it helps you so much that even if you have to change your driving style a bit, it's not a massive change.
For a sim racing fan, that is fascinating stuff. I know that there are drivers out there that say you don't have to invest in the kit. You can be fast without it. And you prove that. You qualified into the Porsche Supercup with a dining chair. But
yeah,
it does help you with that last extra inch.
Yeah, that's the thing. You can get to that top level with anything. But when you then think you've got 2 guys of the exact same ability, and you know, when you get to the top level, that's what most people are like. They're all very, very similar ability. And you have 2 guys, one has a G27 and one has a Simucube wheel. Who's going to win? And it's not even a question. And that's why I think it makes that difference. It's like, when I talk about this stuff, it's not like I'm gaining half a second. I'm talking hundredths of a second, maybe a tenth at a push, maybe 2/10 on a longer track, but it's very, very marginal.
And it makes a difference. And that's why Formula One drivers and teams change 0.1 of a PSI on a tyre or 0.1 of a degree on a front wing or rear wheel. Every little inch makes a difference. Fascinating stuff. One last question from me before we move on to the fan questions. If you do have questions, please get them in to our stream. This year's Porsche Supercup went well, hasn't gone so well, went well and didn't go well at all in the space of 3 or 4 rounds. How do you kind of sum it up? I know you've been quite vocal on the forums recently.
Yeah, so it started off really well. I think every round we've had really good pace. Maybe I was a bit disappointed in my Donington pace, which ironically was the one where I got the most points, which was a theme last season. Whenever I had bad pace, I ended up getting lucky in qualifying 8th, which puts you on reverse grid pole. But so far in the rounds, the pace has been so much better than last year. We just had Le Mans round, and I got the most points of everyone without a win, which was really good. And then, unfortunately, due to a fuel situation where a lot of people ran out of fuel, the results were wiped. And yeah, I was quite vocal on the pro forum about it, that I wasn't very happy with the decision, because I've just gone from leading the championship to now being back to 2nd. But it happens, got to move on. But in general, it's been a pretty solid season. There was a lot of bad luck at Barcelona, and that without that, I'd be in a much better position. But the pace has been really good. There's no reason it's not going to stay as good as it is. So I'm optimistic for the rest of the season. I just hope it stays fair and get a good run of results, no bad luck, and hopefully it goes well.
And have you guys been involved at all in some of the Red Bull real world drivers getting involved virtually? Have you been helping them out get comfortable in the sim racing world?
Yeah, there's been, I've seen a lot of teammates helping them out with F1. I saw someone helping out with Race Room, but we've not really had any on iRacing, and that's where my expertise is. So I've not personally been involved in that stuff too much, but I know there's a lot of it going on in the background. I see it on Discord all the time. Marcel, one of my teammates, has been working with Alex Albon a lot in what was the F1 series that they were doing. Obviously, they're going back to the real thing now, but when they were doing those races, he was helping out a lot. And it's really cool to see, the merge between the two. But I guess it's going to die down a little bit now for a while.
Only for a while. Stuff like VCO, we're here to make sure that it doesn't, and that we keep those pro drivers interested and provide the competitions that are both serious enough for drivers of the real world to be wanting to get involved with, but also fun enough as well. It's a very fine balance, but that is what VCO has managed already to do. And there are plenty of competitions coming up, both in July and August, but also in planning for the winter season to make sure we do not kill this amazing vibe that esports racing is in at the moment. Right. Dave Stevenson asks, favorite iRacing Twitch streamer?
I don't really watch many, to be honest. I kind of like pop in and out. That's a really tricky question. I'll say Max Benecke, just because I really appreciate watching someone that's driving so well. I have a lot of appreciation for driving so well and being able to drive fast. So yeah, I think that gets my vote. But I honestly, if you ask me, I couldn't list many Twitch streamers right now. I watch them, but I'm not regularly enough to be able to say that. Well,
as you said earlier, Jimmy Broadbent's the man that got you into it. So
yeah, that's true.
All hail the Jimmer. Every week he gets a comment.
But yeah, well, that's a YouTube streamer, I guess. So
that is true. Dave was very specific with his question, and he mentioned Twitch, so we kept it on subject. Well done. Right, I know who George Mattock is, and so you now are quivering in your boots because he's asked 2 questions. Ask him about the Cancun holiday that you accidentally won at Race of Champions in 2019. Didn't everybody win one?
So there was this little hot lap competition they had at the side, I guess, for like fans to come along and who are watching the Race of Champions, and there was a holiday up for grabs. And obviously I guess they weren't expecting what was 3 pro sim racers to come along and hop on. So it was kind of a guarantee that one of us would win it. It was luckily me, but never actually got the holiday because I wanted to do it with my friends, and it was for 2 adults and 2 children, so I never actually got to use it. But
does it expire, or could you get married, have kids, and do it in a few years' time?
I think it expires very soon, if not already has, like sometime this year. But I did try. I tried to get it changed, and they wouldn't let me. So
T's and C's always get you in the end.
yes.
He also asks generally what happened in Mexico 2019. There's obviously stories that you haven't mentioned yet.
There's a lot of things I probably can't say. Lots of partying. I'm guessing that's what George is referring to. Lots of drinks drunk, but yeah, no, it is a very awesome experience. You know, lots of hot weather, perfect setting for it. But yeah, I probably can't go into it too much because you know, I'm sure people won't want to hear about their drunk stories and stuff like that. But yeah, a lot of fun was had.
Kudos to George, who also made a really good kind of documentary on not only the season in Formula Ford, but also your visit to the Race of Champions, and a really great insight into the experience that you had, and you know, cleverly edited, not to show too many naughty bits.
Yeah, I think there was a few clips of the party in there, but yeah, George is insanely talented. Really, the videos he made were incredible quality. I can't be grateful enough for all the stuff he's made. So, little plug in there for him.
Yeah, absolutely. We said at the start of the stream, no way, it's never going to go 40 minutes. We are at 36 minutes, Sebi. So you have been interesting. Well done.
Or just really long answers.
Or just really long answers. What is up? What are you up to for the rest of this season now? Only focus on Porsche Supercup? Got other things up your sleeve that you would like to get involved with?
The main focus is definitely the Porsche. There's a couple of BMW events on iRacing, but they're not the main priority. The Porsche is always the priority at the moment. I dabbled in a Assetto Corsa competition that you're involved in, but I then decided it wasn't worth risking any practice time for Porsche, like losing any practice time. And I think it may have clashed, but I'm not certain on that. But it's mostly that. There's a bit of coaching in the side as well, but I can't do too much because then once again it takes away from practice. That you see a recurring theme here. It's everything is about preparing for Porsche.
Full on commitment, as you would expect from a real world driver, and shows that the very best in the world in the esports racing scene need to do exactly the same thing. Thank you very much to Red Bull Esports for allowing us to speak to Sebi Job this evening, and thank you to you, Seb, for being very interesting indeed.
Well, thank you very much for having me on. It was really good fun.
No worries. Next week, we're going to have another man who went to Race of Champions and has recently won the real world Race of Champions on the virtual edition. James Baldwin will be with us, and we'll see you next Monday. For now, have a nice evening.